Okay, good afternoon. Can everybody at home hear me? Just a quick thumbs up, please. Thank you. Okay, what I'd like everybody to do then is to go to their classroom page. I just want to point out some things, and also there's an outline you can follow that would help you get through this next couple days. Also, a reminder that I'm staying after school every day, so just come after school, and if nobody comes, I'm going to leave, but I'm happy to stay for whatever, half an hour a day or something like that, maybe a little longer if you need, and we'll figure out what your questions are. Okay, so if you go to this page here, oh, you know what? I probably didn't post it in this class yet. Give me 1 second here, actually, sorry. I had to restart my computer, and I forgot to do that. Can I do that? Can I blame the computer? Okay, you'll see I just posted a micro review, a welcome review it's called. Go ahead and take a look at that, the welcome review. And it's a really great review. Now, I'll probably print it for you at the end of next semester before the exam so that you have a hard copy. But it's something that you probably want to look at before you take this exam. Okay, so Jason Welker does a really fantastic job. I mean, I don't think his pass rate's as good as mine, but he's probably a lot better at doing this kind of review packet stuff. And so I would just skip a page or two. Some of it's overkill, but you should be able to look through this and say, oh, I know all these things. Now, sometimes there's different terms. He has his determinants of demand labeled a little differently. I just, when I do acronyms, it makes my skin sort of itch, right? So I don't like the acronyms too much, but here's basic formulas for cross-price elasticity of demand and so on. And I think for the most part, you'll look at this, like total revenue test, and say, I know all these things, and be reassured. Now, what you don't know, you'll realize you don't know, and then we can figure that out, okay? There may be some differences in opinion about what's important that he put on there that I don't think are important, so that might be part of it. But I would say read through this and just make sure that it makes sense to you, okay? I also just posted then the review lecture outline. So this is roughly how I will talk about things today and tomorrow, okay? And so it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep this open if you like, and maybe put some extra notes in, or to maybe make a paper copy. I'm not going to do that for you now, but I will do it at the end of the year. I may come around and do it, because I'll probably look at it again, okay? So I just started typing out things. What do I think is important from the top of my head, and then we'll go through and look at these things, okay? So that's. And so back to that classroom page, and make sure review is submitted if you have not done that. Okay, back to classwork there, and scroll all the way down to the beginning of the course. There's Unit 1. Remember that your notes and such are on the bottom always. You have notes and videos and things like that. So let's start, and I'm going to follow this outline. So you want your notebooks out, please, and then probably the outline as well. And I would just flip through, see if your binders, your notebooks, flip through, mark things up, and so on. Basic definitions. What's the point of economics to deal with what problem? Problem of scarcity. Don't be tricked into saying anything else. It may say economists are concerned with this, and there's 5 choices, and one of those choices says firms maximizing profit. Well, look, an economist might be hired to do that, but the big picture is a scarcity problem. So make sure that it's something about society's wants and needs being limited. Remember, we have limited resources with unlimited wants and needs. That's the problem that we're dealing with. Positive versus normative. The minimum wage of $7.25 is what? Positive or normative statement? Positive statement. Man, that minimum wage is just too high. All those people are getting, cushy rides there off that $7.25. That's what? Normative. There's so some value is added to it. Maybe I prescribe a remedy. I say, well, you should lower the minimum wage. Then you start doing that, you're in the realm of normative economics. Okay, of course, economists do both of those. Yep. And really, then our first major concept then was this idea of marginal benefit and marginal cost. And so it's one that we've reviewed, throughout the course, and it hasn't really changed. I'll make sure you know the factors of production, land, labor, capital, and so on. Let's start with this. You get a chart like this, you need to remember always, your choices are always based on the margin. You're always using marginal analysis. So here we are watching the movie. We have a total benefit, total cost. Anytime you see a chart, it's probably incomplete. What should I do? What should I put in here? The marginal benefit. Okay? And so the marginal benefit of one movie is 30 and the second one was an additional 15, right? Because 2 total gives me 45, okay? So change in total benefit divided by the change in the output here, okay? And then this one gives me an additional 5. And here I want marginal cost. And so the first movie cost me an additional 10. 2 cost a total of 20. That means the next one's additional 10 and so on. How many times should I see the movie? Twice. Okay, marginal benefit is equal to the marginal cost. That's your rule. Of course, it really is this, okay? Because you have a situation where 15 and 10 there, but you don't do the other one. You would never pay 10 to get 5 back. That would be a mistake. The only time total is going to be useful, total anything, is probably when you have to calculate total profit, okay? And now they could potentially give you a question like, which one maximizes the total benefit? Well, I guess 3 would give you the most total benefit, but that certainly is an unlikely question because it's just not part of basic economic theory that you would ever do it that many times. Okay, any questions on marginal benefit, marginal costs? Okay. Factors of production, land, labor, capital. Entrepreneurship is always implied, but you should know what those are, okay? Don't forget about human capital, your smarts, your training, things like that. Economic systems. There's 3. We tended to focus on 2. So what are the 3 economic systems? Market system? Command? So they're all mixed. It's just sort of implied. So it was traditional. So let me give you the gist of each. Traditional, low productivity because of poor infrastructure, okay? Because of poor capital. Which one is going to give you guaranteed, in theory, needs being met? Your basic needs being met. Command, actually. So you have to be careful with that. So food, clothing, shelter, command. Which one's going to result in maybe the most inequality? The market. Even though we love markets and markets are really the best answer, I think, there's a downside to them. And when you see market, you need to be thinking pure market unless you're told otherwise. Laissez-faire. Government has, really no hands-on in that situation, okay? So you should know the goods and bads of those. What's good? Higher standard of living with the market, of course. More efficient outcome. Absolutely a more efficient outcome. How come? Because if you want it bad enough, you pay for it, right? Dollars and cents allocate resources pretty well. Otherwise, you just arbitrarily pass it out. It's like, well, I didn't really want it as much as the other person. I gave the example of the parking spaces. You remember the old lady in the mall? Yes, okay. The first model then, so if we look at the first model, it would be the production possibilities curve. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And likely to be an FRQ question on either micro or macro, one of the small ones. So for sure, it'll be multiple choice. And I could go through the notes, but I think we can just do a couple slides here, okay? Or let me just draw. What are the assumptions in the model? How many goods are being produced? 2 goods. So already you can see, it's flawed, but we have 2 goods that we can produce. And tell me about that curve. If you know this assumption, you have it figured out, but otherwise you have a problem. Tell me about that curve. What does that curve represent? There you go. That's the maximum combination that we can have with our given resources. That is fully utilizing our resources. That is the most important assumption. You need to have that down, okay? Because here's the question you get. The question is, you're at full employment of your resources, so we're going to be where? On the line somewhere. It could be here, it could be there. It doesn't really matter. Full employment of resources, and now you have high unemployment, and people want to do this. Oh, high unemployment, that happened. That's not right. How come that's not right? Because this means full employment. If you're not at full employment, you're not on the line. If you shift the line, that's the maximum you could do with those current resources. Okay? So what would shift the line in? Bunch of people die. Very positive outlook. Thank you. How about we just have worse technology or something? Yeah. Okay. Way to put us in a good mood about that. Okay. So A, B, C are all what? Somebody at home, you tell me. Just shout it out, please. The faster you go, the more we can get through this. People at home, what is that? A, B, C. Tell me about those points.
They're all efficient.
Productively efficient.
Good. They're all productively efficient. Which are allocatively efficient? Boy, it's not the right model to know that. Okay? Doesn't really tell me what society wants. Maybe they want more X, more Y, and so on. Point D, inefficient, high unemployment. We're not fully utilizing our resources. Point E, what? Unattainable, impossible, given our current resources. Now, look, we can get there. We just have to improve something. Our resources, okay? That would shift the curve. Better capital. Could be human capital. Watch for that. Better training would do that, okay? Now, you might see a problem like this. And there's two basic questions I could ask you, I suppose. One, I could say something like this. If I make 4 computers, I can also make how many bicycles? Whatever that is. Is that 7? Yeah, 7 bicycles. Okay, right?
No.
What did I say? Oh, I said 4. That is 9. Yeah. What else could I ask you? Well, I could say, what did 4 computers cost me to produce? Or what was the opportunity cost of 4 computers? Well, the opportunity cost of 4 computers was going from 14 bikes down to 9. So it cost me how many? 5. What did you give up? Everybody see it? Okay. So that's a possibility. Or 2 computers cost me 2 bikes. Okay. Because you went from 14 and 0 to 12 and 2. 2 different types of questions. They might say, what did 1 computer cost? What was the first computer? Well, now we have to just figure an average, right? If 2 costs 2, then on average each one was 1. Okay, so those are all possible things. And can I produce 4 computers and 10 bikes? Well, no. How come? I don't have enough productive resources. Could be land, could be labor, capital, whatever it is. Just leave it generic with resources. We would need to change those and improve those. Okay. Let's look at these 2 graphs. You should know the slope of the line means something here. What kind of relationship do we have here? Say it again. This is constant opportunity cost. So calzones and pizza was my original example if you look through the notes. And what happens is every time we add one of these wheat, we give up some number of corn. It doesn't have to be an equal ratio, but the ratio never changes. Okay, so it could be 2 to 1 or 1 to 1 or whatever. How come? How come that's likely straight? Like calzones and pizza probably is a straight production possibilities curve. How come? The resources are easily adaptable. Good. Similar products equals similar resources. There's not a lot of specialization between the 2. The pizza chef is equally adept at making calzones, okay, and so on. Look at what happens here as I make pineapple. 1, 2, 3, 4 pineapples. Which of those pineapples was the most costly? The 4th one, the 4th pineapple. Even though I'm gaining the same amount every time, I gave up all these cacti to do that. Okay, how come? Because the resources are specialized. I'm stealing cacti resources applying them to pineapple. Presumably it's an environmental issue here, but and it doesn't work right. Okay. Do you guys have a cactus in your house? And we have a cactus? I do. I didn't know I had one. You know, these things just sort of pop up. And it's a little one. Is yours a big one or a little one?
I have a couple small ones.
Does it have the long needles?
I don't think so.
Mine has little fuzzy things on it. It doesn't look like long needles. So what happens? What is that? What is that? And then I have a handful of fuzzy needles in my hand that have to be, like 100 of them that have to be pulled out. Yes. People at home, do you think that's amusing? I can't tell. You're covered up. You know what I did? I said, boy, come here. I put it in his head. Okay, so maybe that part I didn't do, but I did put my hand in it. Let's look at this. So you may have to graph something like this. You get a situation, and of course I've already completed the graph, right? But we started here, and then you get some change, and you need to think: does it affect one or both or neither? Whatever the situation. And technological improvement in pizza ovens. Here's what you do wrong. So disregard this curve. Let me just draw it in. You do this. Do you see the problem in that? Now the absolute number of robots is increased. Well, that's impossible. That there's no way to get absolutely more robots. So when you draw this kind of a graph and you're just shifting one, again, disregard that curve. I don't want to waste time on it. Follow the original curve out for a while and then do that. Okay? Arrows. Otherwise, you have no directional change. And really a good idea to say production possibility curve 1, production possibility curve 2. I should just have you do that in the first place. It's not required, and I never did, so, but that's how I would do it. And again, don't forget about that human capital, better training. You should, put a note down about this. Capital goods and future growth. So let me just look at the slide, actually. There we are. Capital goods and future growth. We have two countries. One is focusing more on consumer goods. One is focusing more on capital goods. So Mexico, let's say, is somewhere over here with capital goods. You should be able to compare their growth rates relative to each other. We expect both countries to have future growth because capital today means output tomorrow. They're both making machines, right? Capital. Resources that make other resources, right? Goods and services. And so by giving up consumer goods today, what is Mexico's growth going to look like relative to Panama's? It's going to be larger. We expect them to have more growth. Okay? And you should be able to articulate the answer then, that is, having more capital today would result in more output in the future. Okay? There's a bunch of practice slides that you could just go through and see if you can do them, but it should not be a problem. Okay. Are there any questions about production possibilities curve? Just remember the assumption that the line is full employment of your resources. That's being completely efficient. You need to know, the circular flow. You don't have to draw it, of course, but you should understand. You have firms and households. There's this exchange of goods and services and money, but really, it's implied in your questions about production. And so you need to know the two markets. And that can be kind of tricky. Which market do households supply in? And the producer then, or the firm, is demanding something. Factor market. Okay. And so you need to remember that assumption. That is, households somehow own the factors of production, including capital. You're like, well, don't businesses own capital? Of course they do, okay? But this is the model. And again, the model is a simplification of real life. Okay? And of course, you actually partake in both. You go to the store and you buy something. You are buying a product, of course, a good or a service, but somebody's earning an income. So they work together. Okay. All right, no questions about that. Next, then, the next thing we should probably talk about is comparative advantage, absolute advantage, terms of trade. These things are likely to be in FRQ as well, on both micro and macro. So unit 1 is overlap. That's the only overlap between the two. We will just skip this and jump right into unit 2 when we start macro. Okay. So look, you already know some macro. That's kind of nice, I guess, right? Talk about trade. We should understand that trade will allow us to consume beyond our production possibilities curve. It doesn't allow you to produce beyond it. You know, well, what if you're trading for resources? Well, that would allow that, but really, it's a change in the resources, right? So if we just stick with that definition, we're okay. And who has the absolute advantage here in sugar? Which country? USA. USA can make 35 tons of sugar. They can make what? Explain how that's absolute advantage. They can make more sugar with the same resources. You need that part of the definition. More sugar with the same resources. Brazil can only do 25. Who has the absolute advantage in wheat? US. We can do 30 units, which is more than 10 with the same resources. We have an absolute advantage in both. So I guess we shouldn't trade. What's wrong with that? Yes, and so trade is based on comparative advantage, okay? Comparative advantage. And so, you know, you can quickly see that Brazil then has a comparative advantage in sugar, okay? We're going to see it. Now, if we do that, what happens? This is our consumption line I've drawn it. We could both have more. So trade, in theory, benefits both. I mean, if it's done right. Now, you might get a problem where it doesn't, okay? Now, we need to remember our rules, okay? Here are your rules. Boy, these rules are so important. Make sure the countries are on the left. That Unit 4 test I gave you that you didn't like a whole lot, part of the reason is you got the comparative advantage question wrong. How come? Because the countries were on the top, and you just did the math kind of goofy then, right? Determine whether it's an output or an input question. So this is a super important thing to know. Output, other goes over, input, other goes under. Write out the opportunity cost. I can't stress this enough. Write it out, because otherwise, you're 5 questions later, they give you a goofy term of trade that doesn't quite work, and you can't remember even who produced what good without doing it all over again, okay? Write it out, and then it'll be good. So let's look here. Let's do this example then. So let's assume this is output, that they tell you this is the number of pineapples and radios, okay? How do I do it? Kenya can produce 1 pineapple equals, other goes what if it's output? Other goes over 1/3 radio. 1 radio then equals, other goes over 3 pineapples. And it should be the reciprocal of that. If you didn't do that, if it's not, you did something wrong. Okay? 1 pineapple. And so people don't like to do that. Like, oh, I don't want to put that in. You're going to have problems later. Okay? 1 radio. 1 radio then equals 1 pineapple. Who has the comparative advantage in the production of pineapples? Kenya has a production of comparative advantage. How come? They have a lower opportunity cost. This is your answer. Lower opportunity cost in producing pineapples. It costs them 1/3 of a radio, whereas it costs Kenya 1 radio. You'd rather give up 1/3 than 1 of anything. Here, who has a comparative advantage in producing radios? 1 radio goes 3, 1 radio goes 1. India, they have a lower opportunity cost in producing radios. Okay, you'd rather give up 1 pineapple than 3. Write out a term of trade, please, that satisfies both. Write one out, please. Term of trade that satisfies both. Luke, what do you have?
1 radio equals 2 pineapples.
1 radio equals 2 pineapples. Okay, does that work? Sure, it does. So the way to do that is you just, and this is why you want to write this out. You need to think, first of all, who's making the radios? Okay, India's making radios, and they want at least 1 to be equal. in theory, they'll accept one, but they're not really better off. They want more than one. Okay? So two satisfies them. And Kenya, though, can do it for 3. They don't want to pay 3. I mean, 3, they'd be even. They don't want to pay more than 3. They really want to pay less to be happy, to be better off. They have to pay less. So they're happy to pay 2. We okay with that? Okay. So you might get something goofy like 1 radio equals 4 pineapple. Does this benefit Kenya, India, both, neither? That kind of a question. And if you don't put these letters in up here, you're like, oh, I can't remember who's doing what. Okay. So let's talk about that. 1 radio equals 4 pineapple. Does that benefit who? India. India says yes. Kenya doesn't like the idea. Okay. Or they say 2 radios equals 8 pineapple. Like, oh, what? 2? How do I do 2? I don't know. Draw the number thing you guys do. 2 and 8 and right? So, what do you call it?
Lettuce.
The lettuce, yeah. The box of magic numbers. Okay. Any questions on comparative advantage, absolute advantage? Absolute, more with the same resources. Comparative, lower opportunity cost. So it has to be that. There's some really good practice here. And just go through, and the answers are in here then when you go through, okay? Months to produce 1 car. Months produce 1. What is this? Input. Who has the absolute advantage in cars? Canada. So here you have to remember you want the lowest number of inputs. So you have to be careful. When you guys struggle, when any kid does really, if they know how to do this in general, it is that they didn't catch that as an input question. They treated it like an output. Or they gave them where the countries were on top. Okay? If the countries are on top, then you have to do your math this way, right? And then, it's just easier to rewrite the chart and be uniform in your approach here. Okay, if there's no questions, we will move on to Unit 2. And so let me scroll to Unit 2. And don't forget these videos are in here. They're really helpful. Also, the My AP videos. I mean, there's going to be kids this year that are able to teach themselves, right? Because those videos are pretty good. So if you spent a lot of time on that website and you went through video to video to video, you could probably do the course that way. So just when you don't know what it is, try those videos as well. Unit 2 notes, supply and demand. Lots of questions on this, okay? I'm not going to go through every slide. I'm just going to kind of wing it with you, and then you ask me questions, and then we want examples. We'll find the slides, okay? And so let me talk about some important things. First of all, law of demand. What does it say? Okay, inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Okay, number one thing they're going to challenge you on is the change in quantity demanded versus a change in demand. They're going to challenge you on that many times. Okay, downward sloping. So there's an inverse relationship between these two. How come? Well, common sense tells me that if the price goes up, I want to buy less. How come, though? 3 reasons. Okay, we have the income effect, the substitution effect, the law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, so we're kind of on the bottom of this page now, if you're following along. Income effect. If the price goes up, I'll buy less, in part because it's like having a decrease in my spending ability. The dollars don't go as far. Whereas if something's on sale, it's half off, I might show up and buy 2 or 3 that day because the dollars in my pocket suddenly have more purchasing power. It's like my income increased, though it did not. But relative to that good, it did. Okay? The substitution effect, by far the most prominent of these effects, this is the one that dominates. If the price of Coke goes up, well, the quantity demanded of Coke will decrease because you will buy Pepsi. I hope not. Something other than Pepsi you would buy. Now, what would happen to that thing? The price of Coke goes up. The quantity demand for Coke decreases. What about Diet Coke? What changed? It's actually a demand change for that good, right? The second good is a demand change, okay? And then law of diminishing marginal utility. You keep drinking cans of Coke, what happens? Eventually you get less satisfaction, less utility relative to the previous unit, okay? And so, you know, that's the reason why at $3 a can, maybe I'll buy 2 cans of Monster, but at $3 a can, I will not buy 4 cans of Monster because the fourth one would give me, or the third one I should put, would give me less utility. Now, will I buy that one? Sure, if you lower the price. Okay. Okay, you need to know the shifters of demand. Just what are some real quick? And it's not like you have to list them, but you have to recognize the scenario. And first question is it a supply factor or demand factor first? Does it affect the producer, consumer first? And then what does it do? What's one? Taste and preferences, right? You just like it or don't like it. What else? Price of related goods, complements or substitutes. Okay, so let's try one. Let's assume this happened. Okay, now what happened there? Demand increased. It means we're buying more at all possible prices. Boy, that's a lot different than this. Here we're buying more, but we're buying more because the price decreased. See, it's causation. The only thing that will change quantity demanded is the price of that good. Easy. Everything else is a demand change. Okay? And so taste and preferences, you said price-related goods. Let's assume that this is jelly. Let's talk about jelly. What happened to the price of peanut butter? It decreased. Right? How come? The price of peanut butter decreased. You bought more peanut butter, and then you bought more jelly.
Why would you buy more? Wouldn't you buy less?
Oh,
Because they're related goods.
Am I in a different universe? Are they not complements?
They're jelly.
Peanut butter and jelly, are they complements? Okay, yes. Yeah, you buy them together.
Yeah, so you buy more.
Yes, if the price of, I said what happened to the price of
Oh, okay. Sorry.
peanut butter? Price of peanut butter went down, the quantity demanded of peanut butter increased, and the demand for jelly increased. Make sense? Okay.
So they both increase.
They both increased, but the price decreased.
Okay.
So when you get a problem like that, you need to start with the first good. How would I react to that change with the first good? And then does it make sense with the second good? Okay. Now, if these were substitutes, so let's say this is Pepsi. What happened to the price of Coke? Increased. You bought less Coke then. Less Coke, but more Pepsi. Okay, so you have to kind of rationalize through those goods. Okay, what else could shift demand? Income. If this is a normal good, your income did what? Increased. Okay, if this was an inferior good, you have to be careful now with inferior goods. That means your income decreased. Okay, and so you bought a cheaper alternative is what happened with an inferior good. Price, expectations of a price change, things like that. You need to know the supply changes. And make sure you do it the right way. People, we can't talk about up and down in your answers. This is a rightward shift. What happened to supply? That's really our increase in supply, right? But we don't talk about up and down. This was an increase in supply. Rightward shift. What does it mean? It means at all possible prices, producers are willing and able to produce more. What does this mean? At all possible prices, every price, we're willing and able to buy more. Okay. Now, let me stress this. Okay. Here we are. That was a demand increase. That was also an increase in quantity supplied. Do we see that? We move along the supply curve. How come? Well, the price went up. The producer will produce more, won't they? But they are reacting to the change in demand, which pushed the price up. Everybody see the difference? Okay, it wasn't a supply change, but the seller is going to produce more, aren't they? Okay, are we okay with that? Thumbs up, down. So a change in demand is also a change in quantity supply, vice versa. Okay, so pretty straightforward there. And let's talk about equilibrium price. Okay, I don't know. What's the equilibrium price? 10. Why? Say it again. Oh, I don't like that answer. I don't like when supply equals demand because what is supply? This is supply. That whole thing is not equal to that whole thing, right? So tighten it up a little bit. Not quite supply equals demand. But at $10, the quantity demanded equals to the quantity supplied. Yes, the number of buyers is equal to the number of things offered for sale, right? That's our market clearing price. Okay. What about at $12? Let's assume we just artificially picked $12. It seems like a good price, and this ended up being the price. What would happen here? Now you've created a surplus. How do you know it's a surplus? Because you will find this. This is your quantity supplied. This is your quantity demanded. Quantity supplied is greater than quantity supplied. You have a surplus. Market forces will push the price down to equilibrium. If we try $8, this will end up being our quantity demanded. This will be our quantity supplied. We will have a shortage. We're okay with those things, right? Okay, let's talk about price controls. And again, when you have a question, yell it out, please. Price controls. What happens if I put a price ceiling in at $12? Somebody at home. This is a tougher one than it seems. Jalen, what do you think? Put a price ceiling in at $12.
Wouldn't that raise, or that would lower the quantity demanded, but then raise the quantity supplied?
Nope, not quite. A price ceiling at $12. So, it's non-binding. So tough question. Nothing happened.
Okay.
Nothing happened. So we have to be careful with non-binding floors and ceilings. So like if you want to remember something, remember if they are like they are in real life, it does nothing. Okay? They have to be opposite. What's the definition of a ceiling? Ceiling sets the what? Maximum price. That's like saying you can't charge more than $12. Okay, what's the price going to be this day? $10. It does nothing. Okay, does that make sense? A non-binding situation. Let's make it binding. What would this be then? If this was actually binding, this price control, it would be a price what? So here's my floor, okay? What did my floor do? So I'm saying minimum price now has to be $12. It will, in fact, be $12. Market forces are driving it to 10. It gets stopped at 12. What was the downside of this? Well, this is our quantity, what? Supply. This is our quantity demand. We have a surplus, okay? What will be the quantity? Will it be Q1 or Q2? What will actually be the market quantity here? It'll actually end up being Q2. Everybody see it? You need a buyer and a seller. So it's always going to be on the left here. And of course, since the free market actually gave us the right outcome, that was socially optimal, we've created a problem. Here's our problem. We have deadweight loss. Everybody see the deadweight loss? Find your socially optimal, bad triangle. Start with where you're at, right? Bad triangle pointing to socially optimal, okay? There's your deadweight loss. Anytime you want to explain a market failure, if there's deadweight loss, say you've created deadweight loss, and that'll be good enough, okay? And so on. And what else happened here? Well, before the floor, this was the what? What was this, the big triangle called? consumer surplus. Yeah, the savings they got by paying this lower price than they were willing to pay. Now their consumer surplus has shrunk. Be careful on the exam. They might say change in consumer surplus. Not the new one, not the old one, but the change in the two, which can be kind of tricky. Okay. And so on. And producers lost some surplus as well. It was this. Okay. So like this was the right quantity here because it maximized total welfare, total surplus. And now we have deadweight loss, right? And so now we've lost this amount here, this small part of the triangle from producers and this amount from consumers. But so now we have this lesser amount of producer surplus. Everybody see it? Okay. Let's do this. Quickly, please, graph it. Let's say that I'm a producer and electricity costs go down. Whatever I'm making, I don't know. At the same time, it's a normal good. Same time, incomes go up. Electricity, supply shifter, demand shifter. Supply shifter, right? It's an input cost. So presumably it's going to be that. I mean, that's the most likely input or supply shifters changes in input cost. But, just look at the problem and say, well, does this affect the buyer of the good or the producer of the good first, right? Okay, producer side. And so lower electricity costs, well, that happened, right? Increase in supply. We're willing and able to make more at all possible prices because our cost of production has decreased. Okay, did you go the wrong way with that?
I thought it was saying like how much electricity, like there was like a loss of like electricity or something. I didn't realize it was like the price of electricity.
The price of electricity.
Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to do this fast. It wasn't clear. Incomes increased. All right. What did you do there? Incomes increased. Demand increased? Yeah, sure. All right. So what happened to the price? Yeah, it's indeterminate. Quantity did what? Increase. Okay, so here's the point. You're likely to see a situation where you have a double shift. They happen at the same time. If one happens, then something else happens. Well, you can logically go through and figure that out. But they happen at the same time. One of the two is indeterminate. Which one? It depends on the directional changes of each. So what I would recommend you do is just sort of think about them separately. Okay, this happened first. Well, what happened? Prices down, quantities up. Well, then this happened. And I would graph them separate, right? Just, make a new graph, but prices up, quantities up. Okay? Prices up, quantities up, quantities up. I know that's the answer. That's how you should do it. As long as you start with, I know one of the two is indeterminate, right? One's ambiguous, don't know. But what will happen is, look what I did there. I graphed them so that they're equal. Okay? Twice I did that. And then people will say, well, the price was equal then. Price never changed. Okay, so we just need to remember that rule. They will test you on that. Go ahead.
Will it always be the price being indeterminate?
No, it could be the quantity that's indeterminate. It depends on which direction they go. Let's say electricity prices go down, but then incomes go down. Now what do we have? Electricity prices go down, incomes go down. So now price is down.
So how do you know whether it's price or quantity that's indeterminate?
Because you should look at each change separately. Okay? So each change separate. Okay, here, start with this one. This one happened, right? So I'll write that out. So price went down, quantity increased. Then I'll do the other graph. Demand went up, right? So what happened? Price went up, quantity went up. That's that. These two are the same. The other two fought each other.
Okay, so if they like, are not the same, then they're.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Unless they gave you a scenario, and they wouldn't want to do this because they really want to test this rule, right? But they would give you a scenario where supply increased by more than demand changed, something like that. But then you would know. But okay, so double shift rule. Quotas, you no longer have to graph, so I don't think we need to worry about that. Taxes, you definitely should know taxes. So let's talk about taxes real quick here. And there's really some great practice you can look at. I have a tax slide and so on, a whole PowerPoint dedicated to it, right? Taxes. And so let me just do one quick. Okay. So what are your rules? You should find the original quantity and the original price. Everybody see that? Market price was 12, market quantity was 12, and then we had a tax. Okay? Now, how much was the tax? How many dollars? $3. You guys are counting on your fingers, but that's okay. At vertical distance between the curves. When you got it wrong in the test, some of you, for some reason, you went this way, okay? This is going to represent the price change. Everybody see that? The price change will be the amount of the tax that the buyer does pay. That is true, but you skip the producer part of it, okay? And so what I would do is I would quickly box out the tax, or at least I'd think about it in terms of there's the tax. So the seller will collect $14 per unit. 3 of those dollars they owe the government. They'll have to set that aside. They actually keep that. So the net price, net meaning after tax price is the price, not revenue, is $11. Okay, the net revenue received by the seller is 11 times 10. This area here. Are we okay with that answer? Okay, and so on. Now, this tax, of course, creates deadweight loss. Everybody see the deadweight loss. Anytime you put a tax on something and there's no negative externality, you just did it arbitrarily, you created deadweight loss, inefficient outcome.
So, because the deadweight loss is kind of uneven on that, would that be worse for the consumer?
Yeah, good question. The question is, are the consumer and producer treated equally here? No. The consumer pays $2 of the tax, and the producer pays $1. And you're correct in that there's more deadweight loss taken from consumer surplus than there was taken from the producer surplus. Okay, good question. So now, what determines how much of the tax each pays? Elasticity of demand and supply. Okay, so one of the test questions I gave you, FRQ, you didn't have to graph it, but if you did, you got it right. You had perfectly inelastic demand, meaning the buyer will buy it no matter what. The question was, how much of the $2 tax will the seller pay? Answer, the seller will pay 0. Okay, now how do you know? Well, this was the original price. This was the new price. The tax is the vertical distance between the two. The amount the consumer pays is from the new price down to the old price, or the amount that it went up by. It's all of it, isn't it? It's all of it. Plus, you could just rationalize and say, well, if you're going to buy it no matter what, you're going to buy it. You'll pay it all, okay? Producer will pay 0 of those dollars there. I don't know how to, is it 2? Okay, the most difficult thing for you guys is elasticity, okay? And it's not hard, so we're going to fix it right now. I'm so confident about this. What are we measuring? Just tell me elasticity. What's the big picture? Responsiveness to a change in price. Okay, elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply. Responsiveness to a change in price. Fair enough, okay? We cannot do this. Terrible answer. We cannot say it's elastic because the price went up and the quantity demand went down. This you would expect to happen almost always, unless it's perfectly inelastic or perfectly elastic, correct? Okay. If something is inelastic, the response wasn't very sensitive to the change in price, but that's still not a good answer. It's just a way for you to understand the concept, okay? You need to know the formula, and it's super simple. What always goes on top? Is it quantity or the other thing? It's always quantity. Percent change and quantity. You might want to just rewrite that formula so you can study it. Over the percent change in the other thing. In this case, it's price. Okay. And what we want to know then,
How do we know what the other thing is?
because they'll tell you, so our choices are price elasticity of demand, it's price elasticity of supply, it's price, income elasticity, it's your income, cross price elasticity, the price of the other good. So it's price 3 out of the 4 times, 1 time is income, okay, but that's something else, okay? And so let's assume that the price went up 10%. I'm going to make it a positive 10, and then we bought 5% less, okay? Now, this is the only one that's absolute value. Everything else, the sign matters. It's always going to be a negative. How do you know it's always a negative? Because when price goes up, you should buy what? Less. There should be an inverse relationship between, are we okay with that answer? Okay. And so what do we get? Well, we get a 1/2. What does it make it? Relatively elastic or inelastic?
Yeah.
Relatively what? Inelastic. So put a little pressure on your head, and it probably helped you to figure that out. Okay. Less than 1 is inelastic, relatively inelastic. Okay. Now, how do we know? Think about what you're saying here, people. It's very simple. This change in quantity was less than the change in price. Everybody see it? Whatever the change in price was, percent-wise, we reacted less than that change in quantity. Less than 1. The ratio of the two is less than 1. Okay? If it's equal to 1, it's actually what? Nope. Unit elastic. That's the tough one. Greater than 1 is elastic. So let's say that the price went up 20% and we bought 40% less. Okay, I don't need to put the signs in because I know it's absolute value. We get 2. The quantity was more substantial, change was more substantial than the price change. The buyer responded strongly to that change in price. Elastic. Does that make sense? Okay.
Greater than 1, you said?
Greater than 1 is elastic. And it's always absolute value. Some of you were writing negatives, like, oh, it's a negative something, so it's less than 1. Ooh, no. Absolute value here, okay? And so you should know the basic characteristics because they like to add those in. So let's say we're talking about inelastic or elastic. The more substitutes, the more what? Elastic. So not only, let's say you're monopolistic competition, right? You're a competitor, monopolistic competitive environment. Not only will another firm entering the industry shift your demand curve left, but it will actually also make it more elastic. Does that make sense? Because you have more substitutes. And so your good now becomes more price sensitive. Okay? Price sensitive is the way to think about this. Total revenue test. This is really a nice tool. If all you have to do is decide if it's elastic or inelastic, this is your quick go-to. And you don't need to memorize it, but think about something that's really inelastic, like insulin. If I raise the price of insulin, you would expect the revenue would actually do what? Increase. Price goes up, revenue increases. I know that's an inelastic example. Well, you can figure everything else out from there, can't you? Okay? And so on. Not only that, and of course, this is part of our conversation probably tomorrow, but let's think about putting all these things together. this is where the firm will produce. Is that elastic or inelastic? Elastic range. You need to know your MR rules. MR is greater than 0. It's elastic. But what else do you know? You know that this is revenue maximizing, don't you? So if you drew your revenue curve, total revenue, it would increase because this is elastic. Ugh. That's elastic. This is unit. This is inelastic. You know then that if you drew your total revenue curve, it would look like that. That if you started here and went that way, you were lowering the price, you know that total revenue goes up until it maximizes, doesn't it? Yeah, and then it'll go down. You know all that by having this rule in place and understanding this graph, okay? You also know that this firm will always produce the elastic range because MR equals MC, and it's unlikely that MC is negative. We agree? Right? Okay, so take a look here, please. Very important. What do people do wrong? I'm going to tell you what you do wrong. One, you don't do percent change. Okay, that's one thing. You might want to put a note down. This is what you're going to do wrong if you get it wrong. Two, you switch directions. Unless you want to do the midpoint formula, you can't switch directions. What am I saying? Well, we went from A to B. Find your A and your A here. Okay, what goes on top? What do we say? Quantity or price? Quantity. Okay, percent change. 225 minus 100. It doesn't matter which direction I do those two. Do them in the order that makes the most sense. Put the biggest number first. Divided by the starting value, which is 100. If you divide it by 225, you get it wrong by 100. Over 10 minus 5 divided by 10. What will happen is somebody will do 100 here, and then they'll do 5 here. You switch the directions. You goofed it up. Okay, make sense? Okay. Or total revenue test. 10 times 10 is 100 is 1,000. 5 times 225, 1125. I lowered the price. Total revenue went up. I know it's elastic. Pretty quick. Thumbs up, down. Elasticity. People at home. Okay. Now, what are your two other options? One, elasticity of supply. Same. It's going to be positive, though. So it's always going to be a positive number. Elasticity of supply. Percent change quantity over percent change in price. Okay. Same math. Cross price elasticity. What's the point? We want to know how the price of one good affects the demand for the other. We want to know if they are complements or substitutes. That's it. If you know the concept, easy. What always goes on top? What did I say? Is it the quantity or the other? Percent change in quantity, but it's of one good. Good B. The second good over percent change in price of the original good. Okay? And what if it's a negative? What are they? Now the signs matter. Signs matter. You get a negative. -2. What does it mean?
Attention students, prepare your afternoon announcements. Seniors.
They are
if you
compliments.
an early grad, don't forget to turn in your clearance sheet.
I'd like to finish this if they stop. So
And students, this is just a reminder that exam exemption forms are due no later than 3:30 today. Again, exam exemption forms need to be turned in to the main office today by 3:30.
if you look here real quick, please. So let's assume that the price went up 20%. I do this plus 20, and the quantity went down by 15. That's minus 15. Think about, rather than memorize, think about what happened to this good first. Price of this good went up. Did I buy more or less of this good? Less. And I bought less of this good. So I got a negative. That means they're related. They're complements. Does that make sense?
So negative means complement.
Yeah, you can memorize it, but I think it's easier because that one doesn't seem to make sense. You wouldn't guess it's negative. Okay, this one you would. Income elasticity of demand. The last one is income. It's percent quantity, change in quantity over the other thing. Percent change in income. Let's say my income goes up 10% and I bought 10% more. I put the positives in. Now it's a +1. What is it? What kind of good is it? Normal good. Everybody see that? Does it make sense? Some thumbs up, down? Okay, people at home, what are your questions for me? Nothing. Okay, you guys have a good day.
I exempt this exam but still take it.
Yes. You got any other?
Yeah. And then I emailed you about you taking that test.
Yes.
Is that gonna be inside or anything?
Take it, so, I have to do study hall.
Tears in the eyes.
Oh my god,
So just take it over.
Okay.
Is he okay?
He's other for the audience.
Yep.
I'm saying after I see it.
Okay.